Might be a little loud here because I'm in the Venice canals, not Venice, Italy, but Venice Beach, California. And I want to dedicate this to my mentors, two great teachers, Dr. Jasper Blystone from Loyola Marymount University and Gail Santucci. So lately I've seen entire Instagram pages devoted to the philosophy of Stoicism. It's an ancient Greek philosophy, mostly concerned with Stoic ethics. So the quotes and the explanations there are all about that ethical tradition. And what I find fascinating is that in any ethical system, it's going to be based on the physics. So there's always a foundation of physics, otherwise described as the answer to what is the universe ultimately. And then, of course, you get from there the ethics based on it. So you have what is the universe ultimately? That's the physics, that's the account or explanation or understanding of nature in that philosophical system. What is the universe ultimately? And then you get the ethics. That's a direct result of that. And that's going to be how do we live in accord with nature, at least nature as it's understood in that particular system. So therefore, then that's going to be about the good life. That's going to be about flourishing, the flourishing of animals, humans, beings in nature and everything. And of course, human flourishing. And then it's going to be about the search for happiness. And again, these comprehensive moral systems are always going to be based on this model for the understanding of nature and everything's place in nature. So that's physics. So for instance, if you hold that the universe is random particles colliding, you're usually going to get violence and hedonism. That's going to be the war against of all sort of behavior. The war of all against all. So given this Stoic revival that I'm seeing, I wanted to discuss Stoic physics and put the idea forth that this resurfacing of an ancient school of thought is not an accident in our time, but also that we need to pay close attention to the Stoical understanding of nature to fully unlock the possibilities that are inherent in this kind of resurgence of a philosophical school of thought. So central to Stoic physics are two notions, and bear with me, these are Greek words. Can't help it, it's a Greek philosophy, but I'll explain them thoroughly. So one is logos, Logos. The other is pneuma, Pneuma. These Greek words that I strongly argue are so important to our history that a reclamation of their meaning is crucial to the survival of our species, and frankly, the flourishing of the planet as well. The logos can be defined, very rough exposition here, of course, it's a complicated term, as divine ideas, seminal reasons, the reasons for everything. Word. So this also means speech. Logos means speech, divine speech or human speech, because hint, hint, our speech as human beings is a participation and an actualization of this divine set of ideas that is the logos. And so a lot of traditions, for instance, notably the Hindu tradition of Shaivism, Kashmir Shaivism, which is a school that was developed from a set of texts in the Middle Ages in India, is that the entire universe is actually made of speech, and the speech of this transcendent divinity. And that's why I keep saying divine ideas. And so we also want to see logos as the blueprint for everything possible that can arise in the cosmos. The ordered and intelligent community of beings is the cosmos in interaction. And so everything that can arise in that ordered and intelligent cosmos, that community of beings, everything that can arise, the blueprint for that, the set of instructions, is the logos. It's what we refer to when we use the word logos. Also, if you will, I could call it the spiritual genetic code of the universe. Just because, in our time we use genetics frequently, and that helps with the understanding of sort of biology in this context as well. The spiritual genetic code. Divine ideas can be described as parameters, boundaries that really are instructions for anything, any being, thing and being, really similar, same thing really, that can evolve in time into experience. These instructions, these divine ideas, the logos. These are ideas, mind you, so they're not physical, they're not material, they're not tangible. A short way to explain this here would be governing principles. The logos are governing principles. So I think I've explained quite a bit about logos there. An example would be a flower blooms here in the Venice canals, and it knows exactly what to do. It knows how to integrate the soil. It knows intelligently how to face the sun, all of that, the right season, and so on. And so we can see the idea of that flower. That's what allows us to do science. That's what allows consciousness to take place, is we're actually exploring the idea of a thing, trying to understand it, trying to grasp it, right? If it were just a bunch of disparate things unfolding, we wouldn't be able to understand the unity of what it is. And that's what the idea is. It organizes the development of matter over time. So logos is also a way of talking about evolution, and it's a way of talking about beings and interaction, and it's a way of talking about it in a grand unified sense. The whole cosmos or universe is one beautiful and harmonious symphony. And that intersects with speech as well. This sound aspect, this vibrational aspect. And I'll get there in a second, because that's where Nuema ultimately comes in, just to foreshadow it. But it plays itself out in time and space, and thus what we call matter. So there's idea and matter, there's spirit and matter type thing. And so, we could talk about these ideas, and it sounds like they're boring principles, right? Because really they're just like the scripts for the being and for the whole narrative of the universe. And so how does that become dramatic? How does that become theatrical? So we'll get to that in a second with Nuema, but I wanted to come up upon, I was teaching at a Lutheran school a long time ago, kindergarten, and one of the kids asked me, where does God come from? So in some sense, I wanted to briefly touch on that. That was a great question. So try explaining that to a kindergartner. So what is the origin of these divine ideas? So if someone were to say, okay, there are these divine ideas, and that's what you're saying, that's logos, okay? So that's another, way of talking about this intelligence of the universe and everything. What's the origin? So right there, we're caught in a pickle. And that's because we'd have to use the ideas themselves to describe the origin of the ideas. And so it's really interesting, because these ideas, these beautiful, harmonious instructions, like the laws of music and art and science and the stars and the great expanse of everything, when we try to use the ideas to explain the origin of the ideas, it's like trying to describe what makes beauty beautiful. It's like trying to describe what makes goodness good, or what makes being itself, being. And so we're really caught there. And what this is both wonderful and kind of horrifying in many respects. And this is where a lot of people over the unfolding of history have given up. And a lot of people, like the poet Rumi or mystical thinkers like Meister Eckhart and so on, just to name a few, there's so many in all these different traditions, they actually celebrate that wordless place that isn't a place, and that cannot be described by anything, because things are based on ideas, right? They're governed by ideas. So it cannot be explained by one of those things. And it also cannot be explained by the ideas themselves. Because again, you can't cut the sword metaphor there. You can't explain the origin of these ideas. It's like saying, using causality to explain why causality works, or what's the cause of causality. That's an even better way to say it. So I hope you're getting my drift on that one, that is an incredibly mysterious place. In fact, it's the mystery of all mysteries. And mysticism approaches that. And of course, because you can't use words and so on, a lot of times there's poetry, which is kind of words referring, divine poetry, mystical poetry. It's words trying to express that moment where you dissolve into that ultimate mystery. And that's the value of mysticism. It's ultimately, and this is where words are always going to fail, but it takes you to the place that's beyond fear, and it's beyond life itself even, and death. It's beyond the opposites, because the ideas are the complex of opposites, which create the opposition and beautiful harmonious tension in the universe in time. The blueprints for all of that are the ideas. And so when you go beyond that, or you ask about the origin, or frankly you want to have an experience of the origin, you're going to dissolve. But that's a whole other type of experience that can't even necessarily be called an experience. You just become that. You realize the essence. And we can go into that another time, but the Vedantists in India actually really, the Advaita Vedanta is all, it just means the non-dual. They went beyond duality. They saw the whole thing as beyond duality, the ultimate reality. And they had 3 words to describe it, even though, again, it's beyond description. For thousands of years they've had it. It's called Sat Chit Ananda, and Sat just means pure, infinite being, which again, it's infinite being, so you can't really describe it by finite means or anything that has boundaries or parameters or any idea. And then it's also pure infinite being. Pure consciousness is Chit, so Sat Chit Ananda is pure bliss. And I can go into all that another time, but that is, in short, a very short exposition or attempt at an answer to the question of where the logos, the ideas, originate. It is actually really impossible to give a reply there. When you seek that place, all roads, where from all roads emerge into where they lead, you're transcending everything. The idea of everything, the seed ideas for everything, it's this grand unity that can't even be discussed, which holds all of those things sort of invisibly and divinely in itself. So gave an attempt there, but you dissolve into what came before the Big Bang, if you will. It's another way to talk about it. Notably, the mystery of love leads us there too. And that's a short circuit to the realization of what is beyond the duality of the two lovers. And so, again, that's why the troubadours and Rumi and everything like that, we're always talking about love. Okay, so these ideas, this space of consciousness where the ideas are that govern the emergence and life of beings, of being itself, including and importantly the human being, that's a special kind of being in the order of beinghood. We could talk about these ideas and the origin of these ideas, and we could say God, but clearly not in the sense, again, of a super being that sits at the head of all beings, that's telling everybody what to do and giving out reward and punishment. It's, hopefully I've expressed this to some degree, much more elegant and beautiful than that, so I call it divine, but we're not going to use words and we'll move on from that. But it doesn't mean to stop searching. It doesn't mean to stop searching. None of us do anyway, and there is a calling, if we listen from deep within the root of everything, to this place beyond place. And once we see the cosmos as a creative expression of this undefinable mystery, the sacred, if you will, it does change the game and it changes our ethics. So back to this Stoic revival, you've got these ideas, the logos. And for Stoicism, Stoic physics, it's, there's an acknowledgement. You look around and everything's moving and changing and the ideas are playing themselves out, if you will. And so the world's dynamic after all. And these intangible instructions are scripts. And so if I have a blueprint, for example, for a house, that's all good and fine, but then I need to get the materials, I need to shape the wood, I need to put the plumbing in, and that takes energy and vitality, that's a key word, and moving from the idea to the manifestation of the idea in the complex of space and time. So space and time are extraordinarily crucial there, given that the idea of a house doesn't just emerge all at once, um, in a space as a house. If we're talking about material reality, the idea in some sense, it's like, I think it was Mozart who said, oh, I hear the whole symphony all at once. I'm not sure that's even possible. I think that was what would be called intuition, and that makes sense. You intuit an idea, or you intuit a story, or you intuit a being itself. You kind of understand all of its aspects. That's a different matter too, and for another day. But this manifestation of the house in space and time is really important. It doesn't just emerge all at once on that space. It takes time, and there has to be space for it to arrive in the material reality. There are steps to that evolution, and that's where Nuema comes in, Pnuema. Nuema is the energy of the realization of the idea in the mental space, but also in the material space. It then shapes the raw material of matter into organized beingness, and it's based on those ideas. And so Nuema also means breath, which for anyone who does yoga may recognize this relationship there between Nuema and prana. Prana means the same thing, breath, energy, all of that. And in the system of Hinduism, these are corollaries. They're proxies for each other. Importantly, Nuema also is the Latin word that translate, Nuema from the Greek to the Latin. It is spiritus, which is our word for spirit. So that's the translation of Nuema in Latin. So that's where we get spirit. It's how this pattern, this idea energetically unfolds, the musical sequence behind it, and the law in action. It's why we dance when we hear music. That's that spirit. It's the law in action. It's why we put our ear up to our lover's chest. It's biology, in the sense of the grand and creative symphony of interconnected life on this planet, the vitality of it expressing itself. So for the Stoics and many other religious and philosophical systems, some of which I've mentioned, the divine mind has all these ideas, and then it becomes the divine body through the vital force of spirit. I'll say it one more time, it's super important. So this logos, and we've talked about the origin of it, so we can ditch that for now. The logos, these divine ideas, the whole entire pattern of the cosmos, the vibrating atoms, everything, right? How does it come about? It's through this vital force of the spirit, the Nuema, the breath of the divinity. And breath also is extraordinarily related to speech and the fluctuations of speech. So you can meditate on that connection. The whole thing is that one mind, one vital force, one heart. You could call the vital force the heart, and one body. The whole cosmos is one life. And so that's extraordinarily important, because this is a perfect unity. And the Stoics understood this whole cosmos as an organized unity that was one life, and that's divine, frankly. So recently I was reading about Renaissance magic, and remember, there was a revival of Greek and Roman philosophy during the Renaissance. And so most notably in Italy, the great wealth of the Medicis and these families, I believe they were bankers, all of this started, coming off of the Middle Ages and the growth of the towns and such. There was these wealthy families, and they weren't nobles. They had gotten their wealth through other means, and they were interested in a lot of different things, and they were funding the procurement and translation of ancient texts. And so the interesting thing there was that during the time of the Renaissance, that was also the ascendancy of Christianity. So they were Christianizing these philosophies like Stoicism and ancient Greek philosophies, all that good stuff. They were Christianizing them as well. They were heating them up and merging them together and creating sort of inspirational, inspiring type of thought system sculptures. It's one way of describing it. Putting it all together, creating something extraordinarily novel and definitely inspiring. So what I read there was that, like the ancients and every mystical strain of religion ever, the Renaissance view had these levels. And they had the transcendent beyond. We've talked about that. They had the ideas, the logos. They had the vital spirit, the pneuma, or the spiritus in Latin. And they had the world of matter and time and space. So they connected all of these levels, and in the Renaissance, they were connected through all these correspondences and beautiful things. They would relate music to plants and herbs, and that's how the medicine came to be and all this, and more importantly, magic. And I'm not using magic, and I don't want to use it in any sense other than just this wonderful type of feeling we get when we hear the word magic, like this childlike wonder and awe and the ability to create, right? And this magic, it was the courage to perform the trick of plugging into this beautiful and harmonious structure, these divine ideas, and then restructuring, reforming matter based on that, based on these. And that was that magic. It was the courage to dream. It was the courage to have the guts to plug into this essence, this heart core of that was, at the back of, or the origin of, whatever you want to say, the material world. And the spirit is that which communicates those ideas. And so they were participating in this participation collaboratively with nature. Because here again, you have to see that nature, we're not opposed to nature in this model, in this Stoic model. It's all one life, right? So everything is one body. And the humans are so interesting because we're in the middle of this whole community of being that reflects the interconnected beauty of it all. And so we also see the meaning of the ancient phrase playing out with these Renaissance folks: as above, so below. It was kind of a patterning, and it gives you this idea of really creating something in the world. And so this all started, right, with me wanting to talk about the revival of Stoic ethics. And I believe it's much deeper than that. And I believe that with Western civilization, we're truly in the pincer. And we're facing our own freedom to create squarely in the face. We can cut ourselves off from this logos, this pneuma, this one cosmic life that we all are. Really, as an aside, these concepts literally refer to concepts I can map onto an understanding of all major world religions. In a way, it's a key to unlock that. But back to the idea that these beings, we're these kinds of beings that are trapped in this sort of structure, but we also have the freedom to build or not, right? So we can dream the impossible dream, and we can make it so. And yet we have nuclear weapons. We participate in the intelligent logos of the cosmos, and the best we can do is devise ways to blow each other up. So how can we let ourselves be, as it were, trapped on one level, identifying ourselves reductively as hunks of matter running all around in the war of all against all? And if we can't take the authority and experience of the many that have dared to come before and relay this inspiration to us, we really should seek it ourselves. Because the bottom line is that we are that anyway. We can find this within. And we can see that this cosmos is the dance of the divine, this symphony, this poetry this expression. And it's really sad if we miss it, but we'll be all right too, because if we miss this point, this unfolding, the meaning of it all, we have the freedom to miss this point, but it won't actually change the changeless. Even if we blow up the whole universe, the end is the origin sort of thing. So this is an infinite life based on an infinite being that has the seeds for all beings in all times, and it's a fruitful, varied expression of that, of itself, in this cosmic display. And we're right in the middle of it all, this immortality. And middle management isn't that fun sometimes. I've done that, I've been there. But it was always going to be us, right in the middle, where the wager of the cosmos took place and takes place. This is why in the great German poet Goethe's version of Faust, the wager is made about what a human would do with this freedom. And so he sent Mephistopheles, who represents the devil, to give him basically anything he wants. He can create anything he wants. He can conjure it up. And this wager of this whole entire cosmos was made between God and the devil in this story. And the character Faust is right in the middle, the human being in the middle of it. He was unhappy, and there was a big argument between God and the devil. What would make him truly happy? What would he do with this power, right? And it's definitely for another time to go into fully, but Faust shows us there is no ending, that what we will be creating will be forever onward. And so Goethe writes at the end that all that is transitory is but a symbol, a coincidence of the opposites. And that really a resolution isn't found on either pole. It isn't found by rejecting the world and being an ascetic or just being a hedonist, but it's somehow in integrating these opposites, like the Taoist image of the yin-yang symbol. It's a kind of harmonic tension that is theophonic, or divine revelation itself, in all beings and in all forms of culture. And so it's found everywhere. There's literally nowhere it cannot be found, and it's also found nowhere, if that makes sense. Again, the coincidence of the opposites is the best key to understanding it and who we are. So now then, the best question would be, in this environment of creative freedom, what do we want to do? What do we want to dream? And based on this strain of philosophy taken to its utter culmination, this is truly the only relevant ethical question.